labor-intensive growth and women's rights are a prerequisite for the area to grow and survive in an increasingly complex world economy. Turning the youth bulge into true demographic dividend requires investment in health, in education, in vocational training, so we have to adapt our education programs, in stimulating the private sector and creating jobs. But it requires more. It requires a broadening of vision. It requires concrete steps towards regional integration on the African continent, or in this case in the Mediterranean. It requires taking not only growth but also equity as firm starting points. And in countries already in a demographic danger zone, struggling with stability issues, investing in the social sectors and in job creation is extra vital. It is vital that this group of young people actively take part in our economic and social structures. While the economies of many developing countries may be growing, the rate of job creation doesn't keep pace with absorbing young people who leave school and enter the job market. The development of an entrepreneurial spirit among young people and the development of micro and small enterprises by young people have become critical in many developing countries. And one of the areas where we can stimulate their inclusion is programs aimed at development of skills and knowledge, for example in entrepreneurship. And we do many of them, for instance in the Youth Development Network. We do the same for young farmers in the context of farmers fighting poverty within a program to support farmers' organizations in developing countries. I could say much more about it. But the youth bulge is a phenomenon we face in almost all our post-conflict aid interventions. Another type of countries is security sector reform and DDR. And this is also a reality we have to face together. Another issue, which is the other side, is aging. This may solve problems but cause many others. In my country, an emotional debate is now raging as we speak in the parliament about the sustainability of the state old age pensions provided to Dutch retirees. Our demographics have forced us to plan ahead to keep them affordable by raising the pension age from 65 to 67. Touching this bastion of Dutch social security has proven painful and difficult. Aging is also a problem in many middle-income countries and even some of the poorest countries, with consequences for many areas, from transfer of knowledge, pensions, to social security systems. Here we have new questions. Meanwhile, in some African countries devastated by AIDS, the elderly are the carers of last resort for children who have lost their parents to the pandemic. AIDS has burned a hole in the age group of parents and professionals, leaving the very young and the very old exposed and vulnerable. Again, the poor, and especially women and girls, are hardest hit. Let me add one more factor to the many other sides of the demographic picture: population policy itself. As Dr. Sinding noted, the call for population policy subsided in the West once population growth started slowing down. In fact, some in the West have been arguing for policies to raise fertility rates, among some groups that is. Meanwhile, at the other end of the world is China. The one-child policy was introduced, a drastic response to demographic developments at the opposite end of the policy spectrum from the rights-based approach I support. And Professor Peng demonstrated in his October lecture here that the biggest drop in China's fertility curve was caused by introducing Chinese couples to family planning methods, not by the one-child policy. And this seems to suggest that the rights-based approach and economic necessity are not as much in conflict as might at first seem. In the Netherlands these days, unlike in the past, population policy is no longer a very hotly debated issue. I believe that the relative lack of a population debate now results from our specific Dutch approach to sexual and reproductive health and rights. Our own experience has helped us to see that access to reproductive health, information, services and commodities works better than quantitative population policy. We've been called the champion of the rights-based approach, but I think that's a bit exaggerated. There are many countries, non-governmental organizations and others who fight for this rights-based approach. But it doesn't come without debate. In the Netherlands we had a lot of debate on this issue. Many people fought a long battle to reach the situation where we are today, like Aletta Jacobs more than 100 years ago. She was the first woman to qualify in our country as a doctor. She held free consultations for the poor in Amsterdam, giving family planning courses, and popularized the diaphragm as a means of contraception. And make no mistake about it, 100 years ago in the Netherlands, this was a very sensitive issue, as it remained till the end of the 60s of the last century. In the 1970s, battles were fought about abortion, quite literally around the Blumenhoven Clinic for abortions. Some of you might know this. It's not so strange that emotions ran high, when you consider that family planning and reproductive health are very sensitive issues. This is of course also the case in religious context. But we witnessed real progress. It is safe to say that for the last several decades, access to contraceptives has been virtually universal in the Netherlands. This applies to safe and legal abortion as well. We have often been attacked for the wide availability of abortion. However, there is evidence that although abortion is legally available in the Netherlands, it is not used as a family planning tool. Our abortion rate is very low compared to other countries, a third to a half the level in the United States or other Western European countries. Why? Because we have found the necessity of broad access to sexual and reproductive health information, services and commodities. The contraceptive pill, for instance, is part of the obligatory health insurance package. We know what doesn't work: a ban on abortion. Recently, the Guttmacher Institute published a report confirming that banning abortion does not reduce the number of abortions, but does affect the conditions under which women have abortions. Dutch policy may make some people uncomfortable. Sexual and reproductive health and rights touch on subjects that are considered sensitive, and they are private, also in this country, or even taboo, also in many new groups in this country. After all, they relate to very personal decisions on family planning, relationships and sexuality. These are not cold technocratic issues. They should be discussed with respect and sense of different views, not so much between but within cultures that are constantly on the move. And I'm prepared to defend our policy at any time, and I'm convinced that these sensitive issues have to be raised, also by politicians in international circles. Let me underline that access to sexual and reproductive health and rights is not merely a peculiarity we like to promote abroad. It is crucial for the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. And the MDG 5 is, in my view, the mother of all MDGs. An investment in it promotes the attainment of all other Millennium Development Goals too. In extensive areas of the world, maternal mortality is a tragedy that affects almost everyone. Although motherhood is valued highly in all cultures, women and mothers are not always protected as they should be. Nonetheless, MDG 5 doesn't seem to have a natural constituency. And over again, we have to make the case for sexual and reproductive health and rights and for measures to effectively bring maternal mortality down. Why is that? We all have a mother, and all of us were babies born to those mothers. Why can we not simply come together and make MDG 5 the reality it should have been a long time ago? What makes it even more pressing to focus on sexual and reproductive rights in MDG 5 is the fact that so little progress has been made over the last 20 years. Nor has the pace picked up since 2000, when the MDGs were adopted. MDG 5 is seriously lagging behind. That is why it is my personal biggest shock when I began work as a development minister. Each year, 536,000 women die from pregnancy-related complications, nearly all of them in developing countries. More than 500,000 preventable deaths. That's more than the entire population of The Hague. And it is not necessary. And we are not investing in it. And we know how to do it. There is not the same constituency as we might have for climate change or for AIDS or HIV, all important issues. In the Netherlands, we fully recognize this, but maybe not enough yet. Long ago, we put a rights-based approach at the center of our policy on sexual and reproductive rights. On the basis of this same experience, and you mentioned Cairo, human rights are in essence here at the core of making it function. Dutch sexual and reproductive rights policy in developing countries focuses on investing in women and girls and in family planning, and on providing education, information and access to care, including safe abortion. And we argue for recognizing the key role of young people. About half of the world's population is under 25, and that proportion is growing. Everything depends on their choices and their opportunities. They are quite literally our future. And young women and men must be able to choose, and they must be able to have children safely. They must be able to decide if they want children, how many children they have, and when. Young people need to determine what the agenda will be in practice. That is why young people, men as well as women, are playing an active part in this debate. But above all, it is vital that young people have access to sexual and reproductive health information, education services, and commodities. That is, in fact, in my view,